Hello guys, welcome back to my channel and enjoy this fanfic part 1. Now let's start the fanfic. Under the dawning sun, the sounds of waves crashing and receding along the coast was all that could be heard. Infesting the air was the scent of salt and sea, tinged with a slight smell of blood and steel. For miles, all that could be seen was ocean and sand. Of course, that is only the case if you ignored the new arrival, and sole inhabitant, to the unknown island. This individual was a young boy of 8 years, who was dyed in blood and covered in sand, which burrowed into the wide array of open wounds he wore. He was dressed in an outfit that many would deem was unexpected and strange for one his age, as he was garbed in traditional Anbu fashion with a gray flak jacket and fitted black clothing with tape wrapped around his right leg. His porcelain mask seemed to have been lost in the journey to the island, as can be seen by his fetching appearance. His muscle structure was well defined for someone his age, and he possessed quite the athletic appearance. He was well defined all around, yet it was not overwhelming in mass. It seemed to be a fitting combination of strength and flexibility to allow perfect synchronization between power, speed, and maneuverability. One could say he was bred for combat. His facial structure was fairly mature for his age, as there was little fat to be seen, though it was a curious sight to see 3 scar marks mar both of his cheeks. Though they appeared evenly spaced, and adorably placed, as some females may consider it to be, it could be seen that he was indeed not born with these scars. His hair was a sight that stayed true to the bloodline of his clan. As is genetic for most Uzumaki, his hair was a deep red that, if not distraught from his current situation, would very tantalizing and hypnotic to behold. His hair was a spiky mess that seemed to point in no particular direction and framed over his forehead. It was a wild look that would be sure to garnish attention from the female populace in the future. His frame began to shudder and shiver as he slowly awoke from his state of unconsciousness. He coughed out whatever water he may have swallowed since his unfortunate situation. He struggled for air as he proceeded to vomit out a mix of water, sand, and blood. This process continued for a few moments until he was only dry heaving. His breath started to slow, though still very uneven. As his eyes opened, you could see eyes more deep and blue than the ocean he seemed to appear from. It was catching and mesmerizing, if not for the dull light that it projected. Through his eyes, a void of emotions could be seen, with only the slightest hints of pain showing. The dullness in his eyes showed just how empty he has become. This young boy's name was Naruto Uzumaki. As he slowly sat up, ignoring the pain that seemed to be screaming at him as he moved his body, he glanced at his surrounding to calmly ascertain his situation. As he focused his eyes on the area around him, only 3 words came to mind, all of similar meaning. Barren, empty, desolate. These words can be used to describe the current state of this island. As far as his eyes can see, buildings were in ruins, forestry was torn asunder, and bones were shattered and spread throughout the huge expanse of his vision. As he took in his surroundings, only one place came to mind, as he whispered out in a low voice between breaths, barely audible to even himself. Uzushio, Gakure. As one from the Uzumaki clan, he naturally knew of his heritage, though it was only the most basic of information, as well as some tales and legends of their past. He was aware that his clan members were especially gifted in the sealing arts and possessed a very powerful life force, allowing them to live longer than the average human, though that was the limit to his knowledge. All their history, techniques, and treasures were lost since the time of their downfall. The island was guarded by the large whirlpools that seemed to protect the island, and the weather itself seemed to alter as a defense mechanism to intruders by creating tornadoes and hurricanes. It was a mystery as to what the Uzumaki were truly capable of. It drove some of the great shinobi villages to hunt down their treasure even more, but alas, the power of nature proved to be a much too difficult task for the shinobi of foreign nations. It was rumored that only an Uzumaki was capable of setting foot on the island, though that still left one to wonder how it was possible and what should be done to gain entry. Perhaps, I wasn't viewed as an intruder because my bloodline was detected, thought the boy. It may seem strange that a child his age could be so calm despite his current state of distress, but to him, this only seemed to be a normal thing, which led him to reminisce what started this mess. Flashback. 3 years ago. The room was dark, dreary, and the only source of light being shown was upon two figures within the large room, one larger and one smaller. Following the figures in the shadows were a large number of individuals bearing Anbu masks, all kneeling in deference to the taller figure. Naruto can also be seen kneeling before the taller figure, who was garbed in bandages that covered his right eye. He wore a dark gray robe that fell over his right shoulder, only exposing his white shirt underneath as he held his cane in his left hand. His figure was imposing and domineering, as well as intimidating. One could see a man that has been torn and corrupted by war, with only his injuries and cross-shaped scar on his chin to show for it. This is the man who had raised Naruto since he even became aware of his surroundings and was the shadow of the leaf, Danzo Shimura. He looked down at one of his greatest prospects. A ninja he had trained from his youth, an orphan that was born during a time of bloodshed, and one of the few remaining members of a once powerful clan before its demise. He was raised to be a tool, a weapon for the leaf. But, as with all tools and weapons, things needed to be replaced. Danzo was never a man to form attachments, nor will he ever begin to do so, as he believed it was a sign of weakness. In times of war, sacrifices are necessary if it is for the greater good, and he deemed this child's sacrifice was for the greater good of Konoha. It was barely a week since Konohagakure suffered great casualties from a tragedy that came in the form of a giant fox. The situation within Konoha was chaos with the loss of one of their greatest shinobi, Hiruzen Sarutobi. The news greatly affected all of the citizens and shinobi. He gave his life to seal the Kyuubi into the daughter of the fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze, and the red-hot-blooded habanero of Konoha, Kushina Uzumaki. While Minato originally intended to seal the fox himself, he was reminded by Hiruzen that as fourth Hokage, he has a duty to protect Konoha reaches further than simply giving his life to protect them. He must protect and lead the next generation of shinobi, and led them down the correct path while instilling them the teachings of the will of fire. Hiruzen, knowing his time as a shinobi had died down with the previous war and instatement of the new Hokage, he was determined to perform the sealing himself, even at the cost of his life. His generation was nearing its end, and believed that with his death, a new age would begin. One of greater peace and prosperity. The whole of Konoha mourned the loss of one of their greatest heroes, along with all the others that had lost their life in such a tragedy. However, there was a new worry that plagued the hearts of all the inhabitants of Konoha. Despite the lack of knowledge in the shinobi arts, the civilians were able to pick out the difference in how the Kyuubi was sealed and not killed. This was the cause of the current chaos and disparity in the village hidden in the leaves. Where is the nine-tailed fox? What is going to happen to the village? What is going to stop the demon from appearing again? What if the fox seeks out revenge? These questions and more became a common worry for the village, and they sought out answers. Minato and Kushina were at a loss at what to do. They both have a responsibility to tell the truth to the whole of the village, but they were also aware of the burden that came with being a Jinchuriki. Even if their child, Mito Uzumaki Namikaze, was the child of the fourth Hokage, it did not mean that she would be excused of harassment, abuse, or segregation. It was different from the times Kushina or Mito possessed the fox. The fox was safely kept away and there was no tragedy as a result. With this recent incident, there was a possibility that there may be some individuals who will seek the death of their child through legal means, or through other methods. That is when Danzo brought them an answer in the form of Naruto Uzumaki, and that is what marks the beginning to Naruto's current state. As morbid and cruel as it may seem, Konoha needed a scapegoat. It needed something to ease the fear that constantly tortured their hearts and thoughts. And that is what Danzo presented Minato and Kushina. It was known by the populace of the older generation of shinobi, that only an Uzumaki was capable of bearing the amount of chakra the fox possessed in life. How fortunate it was that Danzo had an Uzumaki in his organization he had picked up years before. And all he had asked the Hokage for in return was the reinstatement of Root, and the true bearer of the fox to never be revealed to anyone outside of the ones who already knew, meaning Jiraiya, the advisors Homura and Kaharu, and themselves. They were reluctant to force another child to bear a responsibility that was never his, and furious at the suggestion as well. This was especially the case with Kushina. The Uzumaki were originally a clan of Uzushiogakure, and they never believed in the will of fire, the same way Konoha did. They had a belief called the will of water. Water was freeform and malleable, flexible in form and capable of changing states, yet even as it changed, it was always still water. In other words, they believed in change, freedom, and the individuality of the Uzumaki, but also believed that change was only possible as one. They were a family, an entity capable of doing so much more when together. Hence, they were water. Her beliefs did skew more in favor of the will of fire, since she spent most of her life in Konoha, but that did not mean she didn't understand her people and their beliefs. Whoever this boy was, he possessed the same bloodline she possessed, a survivor of her clan's genocide, so her reluctancy was clear. In Minato's case, he simply did not believe any child should bear such a burden. However, if he does not go through with this, it will be his child that would bear such a burden. It was a cruel thought, but if he had to pick one over the other, it would be a fact he would defend his loved one over a stranger. This thought process of his only served to agonize him more due to the morals he had grown up with, and he couldn't help but hate how he thought the way he did. In their conflict, Danzo fed them lies of what could come to their child. He played the strings of their emotions like a harp, gently swaying them to his proposition. It may not seem possible for ninja as powerful as Minato, and as stubborn and hot-tempered like Kushina, but everyone has a weakness. In this case, their daughter Mito was a great one. They did not want their daughter to be engulfed in a future of torment and segregations. They did not want her to hear the whispered words of demon, time and time again. They did not wanted her to receive the constant threats towards her life, and live one where she is a constant target of assassination day to day, simply for carrying the demon who brought disaster to their village. Just because they knew the difference, didn't mean the whole of Konoha would accept it. They are in a state where they are blinded by fury and depression, and are willing to make anything a target for their negativity. It is sad knowing how low humans will fall to relieve their own pain and suffering, while ignoring the state of others. It was a harsh truth, but a reality that can only be accepted. Mito was a newborn, a pure and innocent life. One of which, they did not want to sacrifice. Danzo had assured them that his operative that would be replacing Mito had undergone his training. That he was nothing more than an emotionless husk, a tool to be used as he pleased. That the replacement would receive this task like he would any other mission. The two were appalled by his words. They were very much aware of how Root was trained. And though they did not accept such methods, they were slightly relieved the child at least won't suffer the negative emotions that come with bearing such a burden. Through much deliberation and contemplation, they agreed to reinstate Root only if their conditions were met. New operatives must go through the approval of the Hokage, and their training will no longer follow the same course they had experienced before. Creating emotionless husks of a soldier was immoral and not for the good of Konoha's future. All missions would also need to be screened by the Hokage himself before approval. Begrudgingly, Danzo had accepted the terms, though it didn't mean he would follow it to the letter. Which brings us back to the situation Naruto and Danzo were currently in. Naruto can currently be seen kneeling before Danzo, one fist to the floor, the other arm resting upon his knee with his head bowed down. A sign of deference to one's superior officer. Danzo looked upon his greatest prospect, that has now become his greatest opportunity for the revival of Root. Raise your head, Maelstrom. Hearing those words, Naruto slowly rose his head, revealing a porcelain mask of simple design. It was a white mask with holes for his eyes, and a blue symbol of the Uzumaki clan that stretched across. He stared at the man that had raised him from his youth, with nothing but contempt. He tempered himself, however, and reined this contempt in before anything could be sensed. If there was anything he would thank this man for, it would be the ability to control his emotions and his current strength. He could have done without the repeated physical torture and mind-breaking torment he needed to experience, but he supposed his options were heavily limited. Well, more like he didn't have any other options. Danzo truly believed he had broken Naruto's will, made him a perfect soldier, despite the fact he had yet to undergo the final ritual in becoming a root. He figured it wasn't necessary, seeing as his role would be changed soon enough. Danzo, however, underestimated the will of the young Uzumaki. Their clan was known for being stubborn, as well as their temper. At times, it was a great weakness. One that governed their actions without much thought. At other times, it was their greatest strength, granting them power to overcome all obstacles that may stand in their way despite the odds. This was shown when they were invaded by foreign powers, and despite their loss, they did not cave so easily, taking out a large number of forces, to the point where the Third Shinobi World War that was originally planned to happen then, stalled for a period of time to regroup forces. Naruto was a true Uzumaki in that respect. He was stubborn and at first resisted Danzo's treatment. In time, Naruto submitted to Danzo, not out of fear, but necessity. He became aware of how powerless he was. He understood that he was incapable of doing anything at this point. So, he submitted. He understood that Danzo, while cruel, knew how to grant power. And that was what he did. He transformed Naruto into a soldier with great potential. Despite his youth, he was capable of taking on skilled genin, and even low-level chunin with pure skill and jutsu. He was mature beyond his age due to his training. It forced his mind to accelerate and adapt to the changes, and the harsh reality of the world. He had started killing animals at the age of 4, and had even killed his first man at the age of 5. His mind was slowly being tempered to that of a trained killer. He was skilled in the sword, as it was another trait of the Uzumaki. Their body was highly resistant to harm in comparison to other clans, and were very flexible as well. Their extended ages were only part of the reason they were known as the clan of longevity. Danzo had also unknowingly rid Naruto of a traditional Uzumaki weakness, their temper. While it would flare from time to time within Naruto, it would not show, and that was the strongest weapon he had given Naruto. The ability to control his temper would allow him to make calm, calculated decisions while retaining the strong will of his bloodline. Naruto was snapped from his thoughts as he listened to Danzo's next words. Take off your mask, Maelstrom. You will now be referred to by your given name, Naruto Uzumaki. This was unexpected and confused Naruto greatly. He knew Danzo would not ask an agent of Root to reveal themselves unless it was for good reason. Though he was baffled, he did not hesitate to follow through. He understood where he stands, and he has known this fact since he could understand words. He was nothing more than an instrument to be used for Konoha's protection. His life was meaningless unless it was for what Danzo deemed was the greater good. Naruto proceeded to obey Danzo's words and unveiled his face. It was a charming, youthful face, one that would be sure to be the cause of many heartbreaks in the future and make certain a certain green beast chant, youth. There were no blemishes or marks worthy of mention. All that existed were his deep blue eyes and the smooth, tanned skin that fit his current age. Danzo focused his eyes onto Naruto's and stated with an imposing voice, "You have a new mission, and a prolonged one, child. Since the Kyuubi attack, the village has been restless and are in need of a scapegoat. You are to act as the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi and become this village's deterrence towards the unease and panic and felt. You will not cause them harm under any circumstances. This is a necessary step toward our ambition for Konoha to reach new heights." As Danzo continued to speak, Naruto spent his focus in controlling his anger. His fury grew with each word that was spoken, and as much as he wanted to unleash them, he couldn't. He wasn't qualified, nor capable of doing so. He was powerless here. Yes, he was strong for his age, but he was nowhere near strong enough to escape the clutches of Junin-level ninja, especially when Danzo was easily capable of being a cage-level ninja. He simply wouldn't survive, so all he could do was take in his words, and begrudgingly accept whatever mission was planned for him. Through his speech, Danzo hadn't noticed any change in Naruto's demeanor, which showed how successful his training methods were. If Minato truly thought he would change his ways, he was truly blind in judgment of character. Danzo continued, however, we must make it believable that you are the host of the Kyuubi. It is a simple method and one that is easily capable of swaying the fragile hearts of the citizens. Danzo looked to the left and right within the shadows and said, Fu, Torun. With their names called, they revealed themselves to be the newest orphans Danzo had acquired during the Kyuubi tragedy. They were two of many he had received, which truly made Danzo content, knowing he would have a larger force of root operatives soon. He even saw the tragedy as a blessing in disguise. So these are the new blood. They seem to be not much younger than myself, thought Naruto as he examined the entrance of the two new agents. A Yamanaka and an Aburame clan member. How did he get his hands on them? The Yamanaka clan were a well-knit group and liked to keep their abilities to themselves, since abilities having to do with the mind were rare and incredibly dangerous when seeking intel. It was a very sought-out skill in interrogation, and for that reason, had been kept locked in secrecy even now. The Aburame were a bit closed off due to their abilities with insects. Though they were an honored clan, they were also a bit of an outcast since not many can accept the presence of insects without being disturbed to some extent. Hence why they secluded themselves to an extent, associating with others only when necessary. It really made one think how he was capable of doing so without being caught in the act. The Yamanaka was a small, young boy with orange hair tied back into a ponytail, which was traditional Yamanaka fashion. His eyes were yellow and sharp, which gave you the feel that he was a hawk hunting his prey. The Aburame standing next to him wore goggles to shield his eyes like most of his clan, with dark black hair spilling over them slightly. They both wore the usual outfit Anbu operatives were required to wear, along with a Tanto sword on their back. They proceeded to walk towards Naruto, unsheathing their swords. Naruto did nothing but stay in position. He did not believe that Danzo would kill him after assigning him a mission that was so important to the development of Konoha, which meant the blades served another purpose. Though, it was a bit ominous how they seemed to be dripping some sort of acidic solution. The two orphans proceeded to slash across Naruto's face 6 times in total. Naruto felt a burning sensation across his cheeks, but paid it no mind. He had endured much worse than these small scratches. Once Fu and Torun completed their task, they sheathed their weapons and returned back to the shadows. As they disappeared into the darkness, Danzo spoke once again, the marks that have been left on your face resemble that of whiskers on a fox. This will be the symbol that marks you as the bearer of the Kyuubi. They cannot be healed due to a special composition that is capable of scarring the skin of even the toughest of Uzumaki. With this all said, you will live in an apartment on the other side of the village and proceed to have a normal life. Danzo proceeded to turn around, and as he prepared to shunshin away from his position, he looked back to Naruto and left him with only a few words, you are dismissed. With those words, everyone aside from Naruto himself had disappeared, leaving him to his thoughts. His teeth gnashed slightly and his fists clenched, but quickly disappeared as soon as it came. He was already aware of his worth, but now he wasn't even a soldier. He was meant to be a punching bag for the distressed populace of Konoha, and for what? To ease their minds and aching hearts. He was aware of the hardships Jinchuriki go through, and even if he wasn't a true one, he was still going to be the acting Jinchuriki, which may as well be the same. Naruto slowly rose from his position and shunshined away, preparing himself for the onslaught of rage he was sure to receive from the village, for no reason other than being a convenient source of blame. Flashback end. Naruto frowned slightly at the memory, but it was worthless to think about such things now. His eyes narrowed as he stuck out his tongue, which revealed the seal mark all root operatives were required to bear so information could not be spread. The seal showed 5 bars across the tongue with 2 being broken at the bottom. He had tried studying the seal in order to find a way to break it, but he was honestly lacking in the sealing arts. His ancestors would truly be ashamed. This was not due to lack of study on his part though, it was due to the lack of materials in the sealing arts within Konoha. The majority of the sealing arts were within Uzushiogakure, and any sealing arts within Konoha were being protected by their respective clans. The Hiraishin was protected by the 4th Hokage, the caged bird seal was protected by the Hyuga, Jiraiya was always out of Konoha due to studying various subjects of the opposite, presumably to have a more accurate understanding of human anatomy, as well as building a tolerance to seductive techniques. Yeah, he was sure that was the reason. Danzo himself would never reveal the truths of his seal, since that was his primary defense for secrecy. In other words, he was stumped in how to proceed. Funnily enough, he was able to understand the seal, but he didn't know the right methods for disarming it without causing irreparable damage. He had always found it strange how he just seemed to know how a seal would work. It seemed to be a trait of the Uzumaki, but he never understood how that was so. Of course, this was limited to simpler seals, but after being in contact with his current seal, he was capable of deciphering it quite a bit. He was able to understand that each bar represented the 5 senses a human possesses: sight, hearing, touch, taste, and smell. The 2 broken bars at the bottom symbolize the senses that have been forbidden, though it seems the seal isn't perfect. He could see that the original design was meant to silence an individual permanently, as well as completely eliminate any sense of pain an operative may feel. It was also meant to kill the root member should they try to fight against the seal. This would create the perfect soldier, who was incapable of passing along any information and breaking their will through torture and interrogation. However, it seems Danzo isn't as skilled in the art of sealing as the Uzumaki. The structure was much too simple, so he was only capable of limiting what an operative was capable of speaking about, with the only repercussions being paralysis rather than death, and could only numb the pain a root member feels slightly rather than completely. Though, Naruto figured the seal marker couldn't become too complex due to the limited size of a tongue. Anything more complex would require a larger canvas, so to speak. The area of a tongue did not allow for complexity, but did allow secrecy, so he figured that was the trade-off in its application. But despite his knowledge of the seal, he simply couldn't figure out how to disarm it. Creating seals were one thing, but deconstructing required precision, knowledge, and experience. All of which he did not have due to the limited resources in Konoha. Shaking his head of his thoughts, Naruto lifted his battered body and proceeded to enter the broken gate into Uzushiogakure. Perhaps, he can find his answers somewhere in there. Bones breaking, glass shattering, and the sound of a whistling kunai being thrown could be heard in Training Ground 4. It was dark outside, with the only source of light being the reflection of the moon and the shimmer of stars across the large blanket of space called the sky. One would think it would be a night of romance or peace. That, however, was not the case for one Naruto Uzumaki. It had been a couple years since he had received his role as the village lightning rod of hate and misery. When his existence had been announced, there was no immediate reaction from the village. The first stage was shock. In their minds, the villagers truly wanted to believe that the Kyuubi was gone forever, and would no longer be a threat. They wanted to erase the tragedy from their minds and move on with their lives. However, this proved difficult when you hear that the fox who plagued their minds was not only alive, but sealed into the child before them. The 4th Hokage began his speech on how the child should be viewed as a hero for holding back the Kyuubi. His words, however, were for naught. The general populace could only recall the deaths they were faced with, the loss of one of the previous Hokages, and the sacrifices of many shinobi who gave their lives to defend their own. There was only one thing visible in their eyes at that time, that Minato Namikaze knew would appear despite anything he said. It saddened him, and only made him feel more guilty for agreeing to Danzo's proposition. Hate. An untold amount of hate could be felt. It was radiating from their body, giving off a heat of negativity that even a clueless child could feel. As Minato glanced toward the wrongly victimized Uzumaki, he saw nothing. If the young Uzumaki was afraid or intimidated, nothing was shown through his facial expressions or body language. It made Minato frown at the thought of how a child so young was capable of holding themselves as a seasoned shinobi. It made him ponder what methods Danzo used to train someone to be like this. Following the announcement, the effect was immediate. Wherever Naruto would walk, he received the coldest of glares and gazes of hate that would burn any man where he stood. For Naruto, however, he continued to ignore these subtle, or not so subtle, acts of discrimination and journeyed his way to his apartment. This sequence of events had continued for months. For months, he received glares and unfair treatment when requesting services, possessions, or other goods needed for survival. He would be victim to countless indirect messages of hate through graffiti on his walls, destruction of property, and even had his home invaded a number of times. It was a good thing he kept all his possessions within blood seals, or it would have been robbed blind. While ignoring the hate of the citizens may have seemed like a good idea, it only served to irritate them and despise him more. But what was he to do? He was ordered to not act against the villagers. He did not have the strength to resist Danzo, yet. So, he decided to suffer silently, biding his time and growing in strength until he can finally do something about his situation. Going back to the villagers, they were at wit's end on what to do with the current object of their obsession. The focal point of their negativity, Naruto Uzumaki. They wanted him to suffer. They wanted him to scream. They wanted him to feel what they felt the day of the tragedy. They wanted him to fear them. All of this was because of a simple emotion, insecurity. They did not feel safe with him around. They couldn't stand the thought that the fox still lived on inside the belly of this child. No, he was no longer considered a child. He was a demon, an omen that represented the possibility that the same tragedy will appear once more should the fox be released. Everything they have done, and everything they have been doing was out of fear. And they hated to fear the child. Some of the villagers truly believed that if they could make the fox become obedient, if they could bend Naruto to their will, make him submissive to their village, and in turn, making him nothing more than a loyal pet, to protect them and even a toy, to play with when they feel a little upset. It was truly a mix of stupidity and paranoia at its finest. Then finally, some villagers had enough. They couldn't take the stoic appearance of Naruto, and wanted to see him suffer. They could no longer live in fear of a young child. If making him an outcast didn't work, then they would resort to more physical measures. This began their game of fox hunt. At first, it was light physical actions like a shove here, and a brush of the shoulder there. These actions soon evolved with their bravery. They saw that the child didn't retaliate against their actions, and decided to push things further. This also devolved into a game where who could get a reaction out of him, or who could demean him the most. It became a test of courage for the more adventurous citizens. He was slapped and spat upon, and he only turned away. He was punched and kicked, and ignored the pain in favor of something else. He was burned, stabbed, and even bitten into, yet he shirked the pain off as if they were nothing more than insects. This served only to fuel their anger. The punishment towards his body continued, and he proceeded to receive new wounds every day. Broken bones and a bloody nose. Fractured skull and drug overdose. Shattered teeth and flayed skin. Burning his body and drowning him. They tried just about every method they could, but what was strange was how fast he could heal. A broken bone that would take months to heal would only take a couple of weeks or less. They noticed that as he continued to gain more injuries, he would heal faster. It was strange, and scary to the villagers. It was like he was evolving and growing stronger thanks to them. This only renewed their fear towards the young redhead, which has led to Naruto's current position. He is now tied to training pole with countless wounds sporting all over his body. Glass could be seen shattered on his face, with shards surrounding his eyes. His left arm could be seen bent at an impossible angle, and several kunai were buried deep within his legs. Before him were three drunkards that decided to have a little fun with the village toy. One of them was even a retired shinobi. The ex-shinobi continued to laugh with his friends as he looked at Naruto with contempt. He noticed that Naruto had yet to change expressions or even shown any hint of pain that he was dealt, which served to annoy the old man. He walked toward Naruto and grabbed him by the hair, yanking his head back to smack against the pole. He looked into Naruto's eyes and saw nothing, as was expected from the civilian populace, but still served to piss the old man off. The old man clicked his tongue in annoyance and voiced his grievances. Hey brat, you're quite the monster, ya know that? You gotta be. Who the hell breaks an arm like you do and heals it in a few days? You're a freak kid. As he said those words, he swung his leg back and proceeded to knee Naruto where a man was most sensitive, and yelled again, a freak. This action repeated for several moments before he stopped to look at the kid's expression and saw nothing once more. Though this time, the man seemed to laugh, ha. Oh god, not even this is doing it for ya kid. Are you even a boy? The man brought his face closer to Naruto's as if to examine his features. This continued for a few moments before Naruto was able to detect something he had yet to see from any of his offenders, lust. Disgusting, thought Naruto. This useless pile of bones probably can't even get it up anymore. He must have been a lonely soul in the world of romance. Poor old bastard. Just die already, you'll be doing the world a favor if you're truly this desperate, decrepit, and disgusting. Though he wanted to say these insults out loud, he wouldn't. This sick fiend disguised as an old man didn't deserve the satisfaction of his reaction. He never caved before, and this monster wasn't going to be any different from the others. Hee hee, you know, you really could pass for a girl right now. At this, even his friends stopped laughing and turned to face him with an expression of shock. One man yelled out to him, Oi, you're not seriously thinking of raping the kid, are ya? The ex-shinobi only licked his lips slightly and said, It has been a while for me. I can't get woman like I used to. I suppose I could settle for something less. Besides, it ain't rape if the kid doesn't refuse my advances. So, what do ya say, kid? Want this old man to show ya a good time? It certainly beats the hell out of, well, getting beaten. Naruto's answer was to collect all the blood of saliva in his mouth, and launch it directly into the old man's eyes. He couldn't help but smirk at the reaction of the old bastard. The old man began to shout a wide array of new vocabulary, and once his friends helped him clean of the blood and saliva, he then yelled to Naruto, That's it kid. I'm going to do this village in favor and end you right now. Ya wanna play rough How about I shove this kunai up your, then we'll see if you're as sturdy as the rumors claim. As he reached back to grab his kunai, he was suddenly stopped by a hand grasping his arm. He tried to break free, but realized he simply wasn't strong enough to resist. When he looked up, he saw a member of the Anbu holding him back. His mask showed the characteristics of a dog, and he seemed to have gravity-defying gray hair. He remained motionless, until he spoke with cold words, You are to remove yourself from the training fields immediately, or you will be having a hot night with Ibiki in the interrogation department. This served to send shivers down the spine of the ex-shinobi. He was well aware of Ibiki's skills in the interrogation department and had no desire to see him in person. If he wanted to have whatever sanity was left of him, he would do well in listening to the Anbu shinobi who had arrived. He shook off the Anbu member from his grasp and began to leave with his friends, all while muttering how the demon was lucky. As the Anbu operative watched them walk away, He turned his attention toward Naruto, who had already escaped his hold from the pole and was currently taking out the fragments of glass on his forehead and kunai that were stabbed into his leg. The Anbu op shivered slightly at the injuries, and asked Naruto, "Are you okay?" Naruto just gave him a blank look with a raised eyebrow, as if to say, "Do I look okay to you?" The Anbu op chuckled a bit at his expression. It was rare to get one from him, but he supposed that was only natural in his case. "I see. Sorry for asking a silly question," chuckled the Anbu member. "That is okay, Kakashi. I kind have already figured you were clueless about anything other than your porn anyways," Naruto stated dryly. The now named Kakashi's brow twitched a bit at the insult, but decided to let it go. He looked over Naruto's injuries and the blood he had stained the pole and surrounding dirt with and sighed. "You know, Naruto, I'm aware you were an ex-root shinobi. So why don't you defend yourself a bit? Or at least escape from them? Shunshin is a standard technique all operatives must know, so I'm sure you do too." Naruto rose an eyebrow at that. He knew he was an ex-root shinobi. Does that mean he knows he isn't really the Jinchuriki? No, that shouldn't be the case. The only ones who knew were the Hokage, Kushina, Jiraiya, the advisors Homura and Kaharu, as well as Danzo himself. "What's the matter? Tired of saving my?" Naruto spoke in a light joking tone. Kakashi shrugged at his reply. "No, but it is a little saddening, seeing how far some villagers are willing to go, simply because they can't let go of their hatred." Naruto merely brushed off the comment and continued, I look at it as a form of training. I become more patient, as well as develop myself in a new way I recently discovered." Kakashi turned to Naruto slightly surprised by his statement. "Oh. And how does getting yourself maimed to a near-death state constantly train yourself?" "I understand patience, and I will admit that compared to a certain Uzumaki I know," Kakashi quickly flashed his thoughts to a certain redhead who despised being called tomato, before returning back to his thoughts. "I think even patience should have a limit." Naruto did agree with Kakashi to an extent. He had long since lost his patience with these villagers, and grew rather tired of their constant threats and games of torture. Naruto took off his shirt and unsealed a set of bandages and medical salve from a storage seal he had on his arm. While looking over his wounds, he answered back to Kakashi while not taking his focus away from his injuries. "Well, I recently discovered something about the longevity of the Uzumaki clan. It seems that there is more to our bodies than we initially thought." Now this seemed to perk Kakashi's interest quite a bit, since a lot of information on the Uzumaki was lost with their downfall. Kushina didn't have much knowledge herself since she was sent over to Konoha at a very young age. So any information on the Uzumaki clan was bound to garner the interest of others, which in this case, is a great problem. So despite how priceless the information may be in his obvious curiosity, he seemed to worry for Naruto. After all, wouldn't information like this create problems for the future of his clan? He would be treated more as an object, a tool for breeding rather than a soldier. His free will would be limited and he would be barred from forming any relationships of his own choosing. Despite how much he would like to believe that the Konoha was above those acts, he couldn't deny that desire was a strong poison. He could name a few who would do anything to take him under their wing, just to form their own Uzumaki army within the village walls. Naruto, seemingly reading his thoughts, addressed Kakashi's worries before they could develop further. "It's all right, Kakashi. In fact, keeping it a secret is pointless at this stage. My status has always been kept on tabs and my records in the hospital have already piqued the interest of Konoha's high society. It's only a matter of time before it is discovered, so it really matters not who finds out." Naruto stated matter-of-factually as he looked over his wounds once more before dressing them. "It's now or later, and you're one of the few people I can tolerate in this ignorant cesspool of a village." Kakashi only remained silent as he watched Naruto continue to speak while treating himself. He did notice that the blood stopped flowing from his more open wounds. It was always amazing to watch the young Uzumaki's regenerative ability. Naruto spared Kakashi a short glance, and with a slight upturn of the lips, he continued, "In fact, I'd rather you be one of the first few to find out. You don't seem to have any motive for getting closer to me, and you could have always ignored me, like a majority of the shinobi do. You're one of the few that actually seem." Naruto paused and looked down for a moment, before returning his focus back to his injuries, "Well, concern for my well-being. So I think I could trust you with this much." Kakashi I smiled at the redhead's praise. It was very rare to receive any. In fact, I think this may be the first time he has actually voiced out any praise to anyone, Kakashi inwardly thought to himself. I suppose I should feel honored then. Naruto just shook his head lightly with a small smirk, sensing the teasing tone in his voice. Just consider it payback for your help during the hunts. Don't let a whim of mine get to your head, Scarecrow. Besides, I figure what I say may be useful for the other Uzumaki brat. Naruto replied with an equally joking tone. Kakashi merely shrugged his shoulder, knowing who he was speaking of. It wasn't hard to deduce after all. There was only one other Uzumaki child in the village, and it was the princess of Konoha and current heiress to the Uzumaki Namikaze clan, Mito. The daughter of the fourth Hokage and infamous red-hot-blooded habanero, who was known for her temper. When he and Naruto met, they would sometimes converse about random things of interest, and the topic of Kakashi caring for the infant redhead when his sensei and his wife were too busy did come up at times. Though, this was the first time Naruto brought the child up himself in conversation. He had figured Naruto would view their family less favorably, since it was Minato who ultimately subjected him to his current torment. It left him slightly confused, so he decided to voice another question for him: why would you concern yourself for her sake? I figured that you. Before he could finish, Naruto interrupted, knowing what he was trying to say. You figured I would hate her, loathe her, despise her for the way her father sentenced me to a life of damnation and rejection. Kakashi winced slightly at the cold, but true, words Naruto stated with a slight edge to his voice. He only nodded in return, ascertaining that Naruto's guess was indeed correct. Naruto only sighed in response. He figured he would be asked a question like this at some point, not that it was a very big deal to him. He just treated the question as a minor annoyance, but answered anyways: while I do not hate her family, I can't say I care much for them either. Mito is where the exception lies. She is a young and innocent life. She was not the one who outcasted me, and I would be a fool to blame someone who wasn't even aware of her surroundings. Naruto stopped for a moment to bandage the area around his eye before continuing. In fact, I would say that I genuinely care for her. The cycloptic shinobi seemed to raise an eyebrow at that statement. He hadn't known Naruto had met the child already, so it only intrigued him further to know his reasons. Why is that the case? He asked with genuine curiosity. Naruto only rolled his eyes at the porn-addicted shinobi. I swear, he only uses his energy to think when it concerns his life, the life of others, or that Ika series that perv of a Sanin writes, though, I guess he can't be blamed too much for that. It is a unique literary work. Though Naruto wouldn't admit to it, nor would he publicly announce it, he did have a bit of an interest towards the series, for ninja purposes of course. He wanted to be able to resist any techniques of seduction in case the situation arises, and he was currently developing a jutsu that would allow him to seduce others in similar ways. It has yet to be completed since he was picky about the transformations, appearance, but he felt that he was coming close to creating the ultimate goddess. Shaking his thoughts away from that particular subject, he decided to humor the Anbu op with an answer. Kakashi, first and foremost, I am an Uzumaki. I'm sure you are aware of the will of water that we believe in. Essentially, we treat everyone in our clan as a member of our family, one we will care for and protect no matter what. Although, there are some. Naruto's thoughts trailed momentarily to a certain hot-tempered Uzumaki within the village, before regaining his words. Exceptions to this belief, the majority of our clan members truly lived by this rule. Mito is an Uzumaki whom I have no qualms against, so naturally I will look out for her. This is especially true now that not many of us are left. Kakashi's eyes softened when he noticed that, for a moment, Naruto expressed sadness before he quickly corrected himself. There was no way to comfort someone whose clan was near extinct, and whose only surviving members have all scattered throughout the various nations. Only time, and a good woman would probably be able to ease the pain, concluded Kakashi internally, having experienced the pain of loss before, one of which he still suffered from. Finding Naruto's answer to be acceptable, he remained silent. There wasn't much that could be said after a morbid subject of genocide was mentioned. He stood there in patience, allowing Naruto to recollect himself and finish his treatment. Once Naruto finished dressing his wounds on his face, he continued onto his legs where several kunai were once buried. Enough about that though. We strayed from the topic, and I was talking for quite a bit. As I was saying before, I discovered that one of the greatest things about the Uzumaki's body is our adaptability, or evolution, so to speak. Kakashi was confused for the moment, but decided to hold his questions until after he heard what Naruto had to say. And Naruto didn't disappoint. What this refers to is our ability to adapt to the changes in our environment depending on the conditions. We are like chameleons, in the sense that we change in accordance to our surroundings and living conditions. The difference being that the change of a chameleon is superficial, shallow, and is only by appearance. The Uzumaki, however, can change the structure of our bodies to adapt to whatever harsh conditions we are living in. If we live in an area that is too hot, we adapt. Too cold, we adapt. Do you see where I'm getting at? Kakashi could only nod his head dumbly as he tried to absorb this new information. While this is certainly an interesting discovery, how does this apply to Naruto's tort? Kakashi's thoughts suddenly paused at this instance. At the sudden revelation, Kakashi's eyes seemed to have widened, a fact that Naruto seemed to have caught, and sent him an impish grin of his own. It seems you understand now, my gray-haired scarecrow. Right now, I am adapting to the pain. For this to be done, my body needs to completely restructure itself to handle the pain and injuries that I am constantly afflicted with. In other words, the villagers are helping me evolve and grow stronger by constantly abusing and breaking me, and when I mend myself, I become a newer, better, stronger version of myself. I also become resistant to injuries I have experienced and heal faster, hence the shorter intervals between my recovery. It's truly a wonderful ability. Right now, I have the raw physical prowess of a Chunin. And this is at 7 years old. Imagine what I could become if this continued. Kakashi was surprised to see such an excited expression on the once emotionless Jinchuriki. It drew a small smile to form on his lips. This only lasted for a moment as Kakashi was still curious about something. Do you think the other Uzumaki were aware of this ability? Naruto seemed to ponder this for a bit, before he shook his head and responded, I don't think so. This is a very gradual and passive ability in comparison to their specialty in seals. One wouldn't notice unless they underwent repeated torture like I have. I first noticed this during my root conditioning, and even then I never thought too deeply about. Kakashi nodded his head in acceptance at the answer as it did make some sense. Though there was always a possibility that another Uzumaki may have stumbled upon it before. Kakashi let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. It was too much information at one time, and realized it was getting very late. Well, I think it's time we return to our own quarters, Naruto, so I'll see you around. And do try to stay out of trouble, I know you are the one dyeing our uniforms orange. Naruto gave Kakashi an impish grin in response, and said, I have no idea what you are insinuating. Unless you have the evidence, I don't want to hear any accusations. Kakashi only shook his head slightly, and said, you are impossible to understand, Naruto. 1 second you can be mature, and the next you can be someone like your age, a normal child. Naruto frowned slightly at his words and sighed. He turned away and prepared a shunshin to return home, but not before saying his last piece. I never wanted to be mature, Kakashi. I was made this way. Heck, I even consider myself equal to young adults in terms of maturity and intelligence. I never asked for this, it just happened. I never had a choice in life. I may appear heartless, but deep down, I want what any child his age wants. He gave one last look to Kakashi before he separated from him for the night, a home, a family, to be loved, and freedom, Naruto added to himself. He was not in a situation where he could decide his life, and that's what he wanted the most. His life was being controlled by the council, Hokage, and Danzo. Everything else was pointless until he became free, so he could find his own home, find the right woman or women for him, or form his own family. Otherwise, everyone he would come to care for would suffer the same fate he was in, and he felt no one should shoulder the burdens he possessed. Naruto bowed his head slightly to one of the few people he could get along with in the village, signaling his dismissal. Good night, Kakashi, it was a good talk. It's nice being able to have someone I can hold a normal conversation with. With that said, he turned away and vanished in the night, with nothing but falling leaves as evidence to his departure. Kakashi could only stare at the fallen leaves in sadness, truly feeling sympathy for the child. This world is truly a cruel one for someone so young to suffer such a fate. He can only hope there would be a change in his future, and hopefully, for the better. Flashback end. Naruto slowly opened his eyes to see he was in a ruined building without a roof over his head. The clouds were currently eclipsing the sun, staving off any uncomfortable heat he may have felt. He basked in the residue warmth and the slight chill of the breeze. It was calming, relaxing. Probably his first truly peaceful moment since, well, ever. His thoughts reflected back to the memory he just saw. A dream, huh? As Naruto recalled this past memory, light began to return back into his dull, soulless eyes. He remembered the conversations and bickering he used to have with Kakashi, as well as all the pranks he used to make the Anbu suffer from. There were other times he enjoyed as well, and other pleasant people he had met, and he can honestly say that those days definitely made him happier. If not for them, he truly may have become nothing more than an person without drive. A husk of a human being with nothing going for his life. Come to think of it, Kakashi was part of the reason why some of his emotions began to surface more often. He was also the reason why he believed not everyone in Konoha was an ignorant. As Naruto continued to dwell on his thoughts, he suddenly paused in his tracks. He blinked 2 times, 3 times, then proceeded to smack his forehead. It hasn't even been that long since I left the leaf and I'm already reminiscing like I'm some old man. I'm 8, damn it. And I'll be turning 9 soon. Naruto inwardly raged how he sometimes despised his older mindset, he hated feeling like an old man. It always reminded him of that cycloptic, abusive he called a caretaker, putting the meaning of the term very, very lightly. Shirking his thoughts away, Naruto stood up, stretching his limbs, taking in his new appearance. He was now shirtless, as it was pointless in wearing bloodstained clothing. Though he did have a spare shirt in his seal, he felt it was a waste when the weather was beautiful out. He wore black shorts to allow more freedom of movement, but one thing that should be taken away from this sight is how he no longer possessed the wounds he had the day before. It seems all that patience has paid off. I'm positive I have healing factor that could contend with that Kyuubi kid. I look as good as new, thought Naruto as he continued to stretch until he heard something crack in his body. Ah, goddammit. Okay, maybe I am still a little sore. Even if the injury's healed, he would still feel the soreness and slight pain that came from the injury. He had an excellent healing factor, but it didn't mean that it was perfect. After continuing his morning routine for a few moments, he decided it was time to go on a scavenger hunt for Uzumaki treasures. More than anything, he wanted to know more about himself, his clan, his parents. That was always a thought that crossed his mind, but it was always pushed back so he never agonized about it. though there were times it would crop up unexpectedly. Before he began his journey into the ruins of the village, Naruto's last thought lingered towards his family. I wonder who my parents are. It has been hours since Naruto had started his venture through Uzushiogakure, and all he saw was one of three things: ruins, skeletons, and more ruins. It was becoming taxing on his patience. While Naruto did seem patient when being tortured, he at least was able to see some benefit, some results. Here though, he had yet to see a sign of anything. There was nothing here. He only hoped his clan didn't destroy everything in a last-ditch effort to preserve their art from reaching the hands of foreign shinobi. He honestly wouldn't know where to go from there. While Naruto continued browsing through the ruins, he eventually came upon something other than the typical skeleton or common ruin. There were books scattered across the floor of this structure, which he assumed to be the library. At this revelation, Naruto began to grow excited. Books. How could he not be excited? They were the source of knowledge and history passed down through the ages in physical form. Perhaps amongst these books, he could even learn of his heritage. As Naruto collected the few books that were on the ground in good, readable conditions, he began to look through them, but soon began to find himself disappointed with the contents. Origami, paper folding, penmanship. As curious as I am to know why there is a book on origami, this is slightly disappointing. I can't believe this. I do all this searching, and all I find are books dealing with paper and penmanship. With those thoughts, Naruto chucked the book across the room into the wall. The wall cracked a little, but what caught Naruto's attention was what happened after the book rebounded off the wall. When the book landed, dust was kicked up and revealed there to be a marking. The spot that book landed. That's it. With a surprised expression, he lifted himself off the floor with renewed vigor, and went over to where the book was now located. Naruto looked the area thoroughly and studied the slight marking on the floor. Naruto brushed away the dust and ash that engulfed the floor with wind release. Great breakthrough. Though Naruto can be bright, he can be careless at times. The dust and ash blew up into the air, clouding his visions and leaving him in a fit of agonizing coughs. Cough cough, crap, I didn't really think that through. I'm getting too excited and losing my composure. What if there was a trap? What if there was? As Naruto continued to contemplate and remark his stupidity, the cloud of debris began to dissipate, revealing a large seal array. Once he was awoken from his thoughts, Naruto examined the array in shock. This is incredibly complex. I don't even know where to begin. From what I can recognize, that character has something to do with space, and this one targets a location. Is this a teleportation array? Naruto was stunned at what he saw. From what he could pick apart, he assumed that the current seal was something similar to that of a teleportation seal, something that has only been seen and used by the second Hokage, and Minato Namikaze with the Hiraishin marker. It was what made him a legend, and now he is looking at a much more complicated and advanced version than that. As Naruto continued to look through the seal, he wasn't able to understand most of it, much to his dismay. However, he was able to pick out one part that he managed to recognize. A blood seal. This restricts access of the seal to only those the creator recognized, and this ritual was done with blood. Now the question is if this blood seal is limited to the immediate family of the user, or it is a seal for all Uzumaki clan members. This was only a minor worry, however. With little thought, he could deduce that this seal was meant for all Uzumaki. After all, who would place a personal seal in a public location everyone had access to? Well, there is only one way to truly find out, thought Naruto, as he bit into his thumb to draw blood. If I am correct, then the blood needs to be marked here. With finality and confidence in himself, Naruto swiped his blood across the appropriate characters, which led the seal to start glowing. Yes. Now, let's see where this leads, exclaimed Naruto, excited at the prospect of discovering himself, as well as his heritage. As the light dimmed down, Naruto's presence could no longer be seen within the room. Unknown area in Konoha. Outside the walls, One could see that the village has become a much happier place since the time of the Kyubi disaster. Buildings have been rebuilt, families were found and new ones were made. It seemed like a time of peace was beginning for Konoha. It was unfortunate that this pleasant mood that the villagers seemed to be infected with did not seem to affect one particular old man. Danzo Shimura could be seen seated in the dark expanse of his hall, where all of his root operatives would meet for directions and orders. Danzo looked over his two new prospects that seemed to have the most potential of his new batch of emotionless warriors, Fu and Torun. Not much had changed for the two orphans, other than a little growth in height and build. Fu's eyes were sharper. Torun seemed to cover himself more like a proper Aburame clan member with a black cloak, and they seemed incredibly focused on the figure before them. To them, Danzo was a deity, a being worthy of more worship than even the current Hokage. They believed the Hokage basked too much in the light side of the shinobi. True, he was known for his genocide of the Iowa shinobi during the Third Great Shinobi War, but that was done so in the public eye. There was much more to the shinobi world than combat, and it seems the meaning of the term had been lost with time. There was a time before even chakra came to be that true shinobi existed. They did not possess the miracle energy that was chakra and were incapable of performing miraculous feats like walking on water, or standing horizontally against trees. And yet, they were still good at what their kind was designed for, assassination. Once these shinobi gained power, they abandoned their philosophy to remain in the dark. They felt like gods among normal people, capable of performing feats no human would be capable of. That is what started their journey into the light. They became show-offs. Battles became contests of skill and the uniqueness of their abilities. While they retained some of their original shinobi qualities, they had long since abandoned what it meant to truly be stealthy and to remain unseen at all times. To attack from the dark leaving no witnesses. The shinobi of this age had become too soft and open about themselves, and this was a weakness. A weakness that Danzo was aware of, and willing to do anything to correct. In truth, perhaps what Fu and Torun worshipped wasn't Danzo himself, but what he represented. He was the force that protected Konoha in the dark. He was the hero that would remain unseen. He would commit atrocities for the sake of Konoha and keep them hidden away so the village itself would not suffer from his crimes. They knew Danzo was not by any means a good man. But they understood that he was a bad man, with good intentions, and like it or not, his methods were what kept Konoha standing where it was today. He was the root, the foundation of the village, and would continue to protect them from within the shadows. To them, Danzo was a true cage. Snapping their focus back onto their superior, they knelt before him, prepared for anything he has to say, as if his words were the only ones that mattered in the world. With a stare that would pierce the strongest of souls, Danzo questioned his two prospects. You may raise your head, Fu, Torun. What is the status of the village? Fu slightly nodded his head in response. The village has been content lately, and construction seems to be nearing its end. Though, I would attribute most of this good atmosphere to the recent disappearance of Agent Maelstrom, sir. Danzo frowned slightly at the name. While he was indeed satisfied with the outcome of his trade-off, it was never good to lose an agent of high quality like Naruto Uzumaki was. He was skilled, powerful, quick, efficient. He was truly living up to Danzo's image of a perfect soldier. He had even thought to rein him back in once he attended the Shinobi Academy, under the guise of him being an apprentice. It was rare nowadays, but apprenticeships still existed when a ninja wanted to personally pass along their teachings to a particular person rather than a group. Danzo nodded his head in response to Fu. I see. See to it that Naruto Uzumaki is found. He was trained under Root, after all. I don't believe he is one to keel over, especially with his stubborn demeanor, stated Danzo as he recalled the most recent hunt for the Uzumaki boy. This is a perfect opportunity to bring him back into our organization while maintaining the morale of the village. They believe he is dead, so we will pretend that is the case. An Uzumaki is priceless and he could be used to forge a new generation of Uzumaki shinobi. Especially since I came upon a new discovery regarding their bloodline. It would be most fitting for my teaching methods. Danzo was of course referring to the discovery he had made in regards to the Uzumaki's adaptability. One of his agents happened upon a conversation between Kakashi and Kushina, where he asked if Kushina was aware of this trait within their bloodline. She seemed to be confused about the question and asked where this information came from. He did not mention Naruto, since he did not want to betray his trust, and he didn't feel like it would be an appropriate thing to mention that one of her clan members was constantly being tortured by the village, which led to its discovery. It was a disgusting and disturbing thought, one which he didn't want Kushina to worry over and suffer from, so he merely stated he came upon the information from a mission he had ventured on a while back. If he had been paying attention to his surroundings, he would have noticed that a certain bug user under root was listening to the conversation the entire time from the shadows. Danzo rose his hand to signal their dismissal and left them a few parting words. In a dark tone, he stated, "Find Naruto Uzumaki and bring him back into our organization. If he resists, use force. And if he proves to be too difficult, terminate him." Nothing more was said before he disappeared within the darkness. Fu and Torun merely lowered their heads and stated the only response they had for this mission: "Yes, Lord Danzo." Fire release. Great Fireball Jutsu. As the infamous jutsu of the Uchiha was called out, a stream of fire was released, forming into a large ball of flames that soared towards the direction of the sole wooden post in the area. If the post were to possess a mind of its own, it would have surely cried out in agony, demanding retribution for its fallen comrades over the past few days. They were the unfortunate victims and undeserving sacrifices to a certain young Uchiha, and the reason for their suffering was for merely being in the presence of this particular shinobi while he silently seethed and raged. The youth watched, while lost in his musings, as the training post proceeded to be engulfed in a torrent of raging flames that seemed to show no sign of ending anytime soon. It seemed to reflect the youth's state of mind and emotions at the present time. This village, how could they treat life in such a way? What wrongs could Naruto have possibly committed to deserve the torment he received? What has he done that was so deserving of death? This raven-haired youth continued to stare with his cold, onyx eyes at the post with gnashing teeth and clenched fists. His hair slightly flowing from the breeze that drifted from the release and impact of his jutsu. He wore a simple, yet familiar, high-collared navy shirt. It was a common form of wear among the Uchiha and he was no different. He had bandages taped over his forearms and shins, and wore combat shorts with a tool pouch wrapped around his right leg. His simple appearance did nothing to take away from his charm, however. His stoic demeanor, handsome appearance, and skill in the shinobi arts had left fangirls following his every step, in hopes to discover more about the mysterious pretty boy that was Itachi Uchiha. If Itachi had one fear, it would definitely be this group of individuals that seemed to show no lack of restraint in their praise and fawning over him. The constant stares from the distance that seemed to bore into his skull day to day. The pouring of accumulated saliva and drool whenever he was caught staring into space, supposedly giving off an air of mystery and brooding. Even a short glance from him was enough to get them riled up, enough to set off a chain of squealing and cheering of his various strengths and qualities. A light shiver coursed through his spine at this moment, seemingly able to detect the mention of his being in his continual torture of his fangirls. "I feel like someone is discussing one of my greatest fears," Itachi thought very briefly, before returning his focus back onto the nearly charred pole of wood. He could only thank the gods that his skill was rated highly enough, so as to allow him an early graduation and entry into his current team. As the fire began to die down, Itachi began to untense his muscles and relax his facial expression, once more returning the stoic appearance he was famous for. He had long since known about the torment his late friend, Naruto Uzumaki, had suffered. Itachi knew, however, the extent of his beatings were never shared with him. Naruto would sometimes disappear for days, or weeks, before meeting one another again. This time, however, didn't seem to be the case. Naruto was pronounced missing in action after another hunt against him. The difference with this one was that a couple of grudge-bearing Junin also got involved. He was chased and beaten by the civilians and Junin ninja, until they seemingly had a bright idea. They took the supposed Jinchuriki away from the village towards a large body of flowing water, before dumping him in. The Junins weren't complete idiots. They knew the child wasn't the Kyuubi incarnated. That didn't mean they wouldn't take matters into their own hands to avoid another tragedy. They knew if the boy was killed, the Kyuubi would simply reform, and possibly, seek revenge against Konoha. So they kindly deported him. While there may be a chance he would have died as he was carried by the water, they doubted it would happen. Where this belief came from was uncertain. It was suspicious in fact, but they merely pleaded that they got carried away with the hunt and made a rash decision. Needless to say, they have been stripped of rank and took a trip to the T&I department for a good period of time. They were prohibited from rejoining the shinobi ranks, due to losing a powerful weapon, and possibly releasing a future threat to the village. While Itachi knew Naruto was strong, he knew that he wasn't at the level of competing against Junin quite yet. He released a long breath in an attempt to calm himself before returning home. He did not want to be questioned on his mood and refused to bother his parents with his worries. He usually had Shisui or Naruto for those kinds of things, but the lacking presence of said shinobi, and one of the people he knew that could be called a true friend within the village, seemed to be the cause for his most recent distress. When his thoughts were directed toward the young Uzumaki, he smiled as he recalled when they first met. It was some time after the birth of his brother and Kyuubi incident that they met, and he had already started attending the academy. It was one of the bigger moments in his life even until now. Flashback. 2 years ago, our favorite Uchiha prodigy could be seen in the woods presently, training his technique and accuracy in kunai throwing and trajectory control. With closed eyes, he takes in a large breath. In his moment of pause, the sound of the wind breezing through the leaves and the chirping of smaller animals could be heard. This moment, however, lasted for only a few seconds before the child opened his eyes once more. As a clear demonstration of his determination and skill, he flung his kunai into multiple directions. Some bounced and reflected off one another with an audible clang of steel, while others found their place in the target more directly. The sound of contacting steel and whistles in the wind all ended under a couple of seconds, with all of the thrown kunai reaching the otherwise impossible targets he had displaced among the trees and earth. Taking a final look at the status of the targets, he finally released the hold he had on his breath, taking in the fresh air of nature. It was a moment of peace, one he found that he needed with the chaos that seemed to envelope his mind as of late. That was when he heard a whistle of awe among the trees. I was being watched. How did I not sense them? Itachi mused momentarily. Before he decided to act upon his concerns for the mysterious spy, he heard the voice speak from behind a nearby tree. I suppose it's true what the rumors say about you being a prodigy. That's not a skill someone your age usually has. But, I suppose as an heir to the clan, there is some pressure to be the best. As the voice completed his sentence, he stepped out into view to reveal a curious-looking redhead with what appeared to be whisker marks. He was a youth slightly taller than himself with a smirk on his that seemed to display a mischievous nature. He wasn't someone he knew personally, but he had seen him around the village. His name was well known after all, considering the announcement of him being the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. Itachi was never one to judge someone's character by something out of their control. From the looks of it, he was around his own age and didn't seem to have any ill intentions. After a moment, he untensed his muscles a bit and moved into a more relaxed and welcoming stance, so as to not put the unexpected visitor on guard. You are Naruto Uzumaki, Jinchuriki of the Nine-Tailed Fox. May I ask what brings you here? Itachi stated in a stoic tone of voice most of his peers would view as off-putting, but Naruto didn't seem to mind as he simply shrugged his shoulders in return. Well, there isn't much to do in a village that basically hates your guts, so I decided to venture around. They tend to keep away from wooded areas for the most part now, since that incident at the Forest of Death, Naruto stated, shaking his head side to side in an obvious bid to showcase his sarcastic and mocking tone. Those poor bastards, well, persistence is not necessarily a bad quality, but I guess it can sometimes come with a price. Theirs just happened to be a cave of oversized bears. Compliments to the Anbu though. They must have a really fast response time if they were able to arrive before anyone was eaten or killed. If the casual dismissal of possible deaths seemed off-putting to Itachi, it didn't show in his expression or body language. In fact, he felt that if someone was willing to perform such degrading acts of assault and battery towards a child, they should be prepared for any repercussions. Itachi didn't seem too interested in the topic, as it was known to quite a number of villagers, so picking this information up wasn't too difficult. He dismissed the topic to voice another question to the, unbeknownst to him, false Jinchuriki. I see. May I ask why you chose to reveal yourself only now? He stated while standing with his arms to the side. He didn't think the Uzumaki came to threaten him in any way, so he adopted a comfortable position. Naruto seemed to ponder for a moment, then ultimately just shrugged his shoulder once more before responding. I was just curious about your skill and didn't want to interrupt. You also seem to be trying to take your focus off of something, so I just let you brood for a bit until you sensed me. Itachi only nodded in response. Indeed, his mind tended to wander on various subjects of life and death. He wanted to understand many things. Like what a shinobi is. What is a village? It boggled him constantly, and he tended to lose focus of his surroundings when he had such habits. It was a habit he had difficulty in correcting and knew it was something that needed to be mended before working as a shinobi. Distractions only lead to death, something he was more than familiar with during the Third Shinobi World War. Naruto seemed to pick up on his brooding mood once again and decided to say something to correct it. Hey kid, you shouldn't be so depressed all the time. You're sure to get wrinkles by the time you're a teenager if you do. Itachi seemed to wake up from his words, and merely nodded in response. He figured Naruto wouldn't be in the way while he continued to train, so he walked over to his kunai that had burrowed into their targets, and proceeded to remove them from their positions back into his tool pouch. While he was reaching for one of his kunai, he stopped for a moment. He thought of something as he turned to Naruto and asked him a question related to his constant troubles. Uzumaki, have you? Before Itachi continued, Naruto swiftly interrupted to correct him. Naruto, just call me Naruto. I already have a mindset of a geezer, I don't need to be referred to like I am one as well. We're the same age, so treat me like a kid. Although Itachi found it contradictory and ridiculous that Naruto didn't want to be viewed as a geezer, yet called him a kid, he just nodded his head before continuing. Naruto, have you seen the reality of war? Naruto, seeing where the conversation was heading, nodded his head and answered back, you're referring to the Third Shinobi World War, huh? Naruto paused until he received a slow, but near imperceptible nod from Itachi before continuing. I see. Well, what is it you wanted to ask? I'm sure it's what has been bugging you, and asking whether or not I had experienced the tragedies the war brought is not the actual reason, so go ahead. I'll listen. With the last of kunai picked up off the ground, Itachi turned to Naruto fully before answering. I will admit that war has caused me unending thoughts about what it means to be a shinobi. What it means to be a part of the village, but what I wanted to ask was, what is a life to you? Naruto sighed audibly at the rather difficult question. It was one that could have many answers, with none being quite correct. He too had thought about this during his days in Root, but ultimately came upon one conclusion. It was not a solid one, but it would hold until he found a right one. After a couple moments of silent staring between the two, he finally voiced his thoughts. Itachi, I believe all life has meaning, it just has yet to be found. He noticed that Itachi didn't seem too satisfied by the answer, so he proceeded to walk towards him at a slow pace until he stood before him. All of the constant theories of life and death. The meanings behind a village and shinobi, they are infinite. Considering everyone in this world is unique, it is safe to assume that their thoughts will be equally unique. Not a single person is the same, there will always be a difference among beliefs, hence why I cannot give you a straight answer even if I wanted to. Whatever I believe may not fit what you believe in, and it is never healthy to force yourself to do so. At this, Itachi seemed to bow his head a little in contemplation, but before he could delve any deeper, he felt two fingers prod his forehead, pushing his gaze back onto the red head. With a genuine smile on his lips, Naruto said, "Give it time, Itachi, and I'm sure you'll find an answer." Your answer. Not mine or anyone else's. The answer that is unique to yourself, and will remain so until the end of your days. Itachi, for once, smiled at the answer. He truly was overthinking such things, he would admit to that. He had time to find his answer, so there was no sense in rushing. Until then, he will perform his duties to Konoha and become the best he can be, if not for himself, for the sake of others, his parents, and his newborn brother. Seeing the look of realization and recognition on Itachi's face, Naruto slowly retracted his fingers from the Uchiha's forehead before continuing with a playful grin, "Don't think too much on it, you'll only seem like a brooding brat. Isn't that why your fangirls continue to hunt you down despite any form of resistance you have? I'm starting to think that you're the kind of person that gets off on torture." Naruto chuckled when he saw the look of slight horror on the prodigy's face. "I suppose everyone has some form of weakness. Hee, this is too funny." An Uchiha elite, intimidated by the mere sight of squealing girls and yipping harlots, all but begging to be in a relationship with him. He chuckled at this thought, before continuing his teasing. "If you'd like, I did happen upon this one novel called Ika Ika, Bondage Heaven. It details quite the story about someone with tendencies much like yours." He began to laugh a little when he saw the once horrified expression devolve into a much more disturbed one. Itachi uncharacteristically pouted once he realized he was being teased. Being around Naruto just seemed to bring out his more childish side. It was different, and pleasant, knowing he could act his true age around someone. The Uchiha brought a hand to his forehead and rubbed it slightly, remembering how two fingers were once present there. He refocused his eyes onto the culprit and asked, "Why did you do that?" Naruto stopped his short fit of laughter, seemingly confused by the question, before asking for clarification. "Do what?" Itachi just stared for a moment while rubbing the spot that was targeted by the Uzumaki before him, before re-specifying his curveball of a question. "Why did you poke my forehead?" This seemed to pause Naruto for a second. 2 seconds. 3 seconds, and on the fourth, he began to chuckle. And after a few more seconds, it evolved in a fit of laughter that left him hunched over and kneeling on the ground. Itachi was unamused, if the twitching of his brow was anything to go by. After a minute or two, Naruto began to calm down, and decided to explain himself to the Uchiha while wiping a tear from his eye, before said Uchiha could become too irritated. Sorry, it's just that after all the deep shit we talked about, you question why I poked you. I was certain you would question my reasoning at the very least. To be honest, I'm still surprised you're talking to me at all, if we're considering my reputation as a Jinchuriki. It was unexpected. You sure know how to keep your priorities straight, nay, Uchiha brat. Naruto finally answered with a short chuckle between words. Itachi looked visibly annoyed at the statement and decided to voice this out. You look to be around my age, so I doubt you have the right to call me a brat. While Itachi continued to look peeved, he was also inwardly happy. Happy that someone saw him as a human being rather than some prodigy so high on a pedestal, beyond the reach of his peers. If there was anyone he could get along with his age, he felt that person would be Naruto. Yeah, whatever brat. Well, to answer your question, I don't know. Naruto responded bluntly. Itachi would have face-faulted if he were not so in control of himself. What is that supposed to mean? Itachi couldn't help but question the answer Naruto gave, or lack of one. Scratching his chin, Naruto said, "It means what it means. I don't know, I kinda just did it on a whim, but, I guess if I had to try to explain it, I guess I wanted to try to get my message across. You know, kind of like, projecting my thoughts and feelings onto the tips of my fingers and focus it onto the whirlpool of emotions that was twisting and turning inside of that head of yours." Itachi, unknowingly recontinued his previous ministrations on his forehead, as if to try to understand the feeling. Rather than a technique, I guess it was an act of faith. Faith that you would understand what I meant through contact. Faith that we could understand each other through that one moment of contact. Through this conversation, I felt you and me were similar in some ways, so I believed it would work. So, tell me, did it? Naruto finished with a cheeky grin. Itachi thought about it for a moment. It was a simple physical interaction, but it seemed endearing in a way. Almost as if he could connect Naruto with himself, understand him, and it seemed to send a signal of care. Sympathy. Of what? He wasn't sure, but he definitely felt more relaxed and calm after the act. Releasing a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, he spoke back, "Yes, I think it did." There was a moment of silence, before another voice spoke up, breaking it. It was another Uchiha youth that Itachi seemed to recognize. "That's some deep stuff you guys are talking about. I definitely wouldn't have thought there were kids your age that would look so deeply into things." The new entry spoke in a light-hearted tone. Slow in response, but still questioning the presence of his senior, Itachi answered first, "Shisui. What are you doing here?" The boy merely chuckled in response before answering, "I think that's a question better left for you two. Aren't you supposed to be in the academy?" Naruto, whose only response to the unexpected entry of the Uchiha was nothing more than a raised eyebrow, only shook his side to side. "Not for me. I'm not even enrolled, courtesy of our fantastic council, who believed I would only become a threat if I received proper training," Naruto said in a sarcastic tone in regards to the council. While some protested the decision, feeling that a weapon should be sharpened and honed as the perfect means of deterrence against villages, a majority felt more safe if Naruto did not learn any methods of killing, in fear of any revenge he may exact upon his civilian offenders. Little did they know he still trained in secret and had already received high-quality lessons from being with Root, if you considered mentally, and physically, debilitating torture training. Shisui only chuckled nervously, knowing how the village pariah was treated. He did not feel the same way as others, but was powerless to do anything. He then turned his focus onto Itachi, who shook his head as well, denying the fact. "I'm not missing lessons either," he stated confidently, knowing he had a shadow clone taking his place. Naruto seemed ponder his answer for a moment, before nodding his head in understanding. "Ah, I see. You used shadow clones. I love that technique. It has so many uses," Naruto expressed vocally. He was familiar with the technique, and it really was among his favorites. It served many purposes in training, and he could spam more than the average shinobi due to his Uzumaki heritage having naturally larger chakra reserves. If he was the actual Jinchuriki, he was certain that he could spam possibly thousands of copies, but since that wasn't the case, he was limited to a supply from 10 to 30, varying in quality depending on how much chakra was used and how many he created. Shaking himself from his thoughts, he noticed that Shisui and Itachi were still talking and decided to join the conversation. They were both interesting people, and he felt like he could get along with them. Neither saw him as the Kyuubi and conversed with him as if he was a normal person. This continued for a while until Itachi felt his shadow clone disperse at the school due to some conflict between students. This situation was also what led to his skills being discovered by the teachers, allowing him an early graduation later in the year. Following the disappearance of his clone, the three young shinobi bid each other farewell, looking forward to another opportunity where they could possibly train together. Flashback end. Following that day, they would meet every so often to train or converse with one another. Due to Naruto's reputation, it did have to be kept a secret since they did not know how their families would react. Naruto could care less, as he just enjoyed having pleasant company for once. Itachi awoke from his reminiscence once he realized that he had trekked home from the training grounds. At the door waiting was his father, Fugaku Uchiha, who looked upon him with a proud smile. Itachi was a true prodigy within the Uchiha clan, so how could he not be proud of his own flesh and blood? He was capable of performing a wide array of jutsu, skilled in taijutsu, stealth, and various other areas of importance for a shinobi. Welcome home Itachi, Fugaku said with a fatherly tone. Lunch is almost ready, so wash yourself before coming to the table. Itachi nodded in response, but before he could respond back, he was tackled by a short bundle of black hair. This child of unsuppressed joy was his younger brother, Sasuke. He loved his older brother, perhaps more so than his father and mother. Itachi had always looked after him in their parents' absence, and genuinely cared for him. If there was someone Sasuke felt he could trust, it would naturally be his older brother. Itachi, shouted the ecstatic little Uchiha. Can we play today? I'm so bored. Please. As if to express his eagerness, the little Uchiha jumped repeatedly up and down while holding Itachi down in an iron hug. Itachi could only smile solemnly and with regret. Sorry Sasuke, I have a mission after lunch. Maybe another day. Sasuke deflated quickly hearing these words, before he felt a familiar set of fingers press against his forehead. He never understood why, but he always felt warm and safe whenever Itachi did this. Please understand Sasuke, and forgive me. I will surely make time for you another day, Itachi inwardly mused, hoping he got the message across. Sasuke's deflation lasted for only a moment, before he smiled once again at his favorite brother. Okay, but you promised. Now you have to play with me next time. The little Uchiha rebutted firmly. Itachi, Fugaku, and now their mother Makoto, who had appeared sometime during the conversation, could only laugh at the young Uchiha. Breaking everyone from their thoughts, Makoto clapped her hands to get their attention. Okay everyone, I've already finished dinner, so come wash up before you eat. With that said, the small family made their way into the house, but not before Itachi sent a pondering glance to the sky behind him, with his last thought being about his red-haired friend. I hope you are well, Naruto. Uzushiogakure Underground Tunnel Network. All-encompassing darkness was all that existed in this hidden underground chamber. The walls were aged as proven by the growing plantation and large stretch of cracks and crevices among the walls and floors. It appeared fragile and ancient, almost as if it would collapse with a small shock or quake. To the knowledge of no one, these walls have stood for generations, dating back to an era even before the First Shinobi World War, and perhaps even older. Despite its appearance, it had remained sturdy and strong, having stood against the strongest of quakes and turbulent storms. The room itself was a marvel of history, one of which many would give their life to examine. A remnant of time, left only to decay out of reach from the rest of the world. The walls were riddled with seals and markings of ages past that perhaps even the great Jiraiya and Minato Namikaze would be hard-pressed to even read such ancient writing in scriptures. What these seals represented remained unclear, and perhaps would remain so for a long period of time. Within this huge expanse of darkness, a light suddenly began to illuminate in the center of the chamber. Seals began to glow as a familiar figure appeared within. This figure was none other than Naruto Uzumaki. And as quickly as the light came, it had disappeared with a low hum that echoed in the room, seemingly to signify that a set of seals had been activated once more. This left the lone figure with nothing to see but a blanket of black, a darkness so deep his own hands were invisible to his sight. The room, void of sound and furnishings, entered an eerie silence. There was more to this room than meets the eye, something Naruto seemed to realize. For once in the entirety of his journey into Uzushiogakure, he felt fear. This fear did not come from his lack of visuals, however. The seals that littered the room was far more complicated than that and capable of much, much more. What is this? Naruto thought with a cold sweat dripping down his spine. I can't feel anything. There is nothing. What Naruto was experiencing was a technique beyond the capability of anyone that was still living in the world. An ancient sealing jutsu called sensory void prison, also called SV prison for short in the past. It was a technique that struck fear into the hearts of all who heard of it and even more to the ones who were possessed by the technique. The markings on the walls and floor turned the natural five senses of anyone inside into nothing. An ever-present darkness was all that clouded their vision. All formations of sound was silenced. Taste became nothing and scent was non-existent, and though it was possible to move, the body was numbed of all feeling. Not a touch could be sensed and pain was ignored. Your mind knew it was moving, but your body never felt the actions that took place. It was an absolute prison of the void, taking away the tools all humans used to be aware. It erased what made humans aware of their surroundings and themselves. It blocked out all sources a human used to gather information and experience in their lives. It was a torture to the human mind, for it was capable of leaving any human being with only one feeling, helplessness. You would be left with nothing but your thoughts, which only served to aid your misery. With your whole being taken from you besides your own ability to think, you would constantly be tortured by the loss of your senses, living in fear of becoming nothing as well. As if sensing the distress of the boy, the seals began to brighten once more, forming a path of glowing symbols and characters, as if directing the child. Naruto, taking a moment to calm down and try to assess the situation, watched the seals glow with a wary gaze. While I can't say this isn't suspicious, I don't have much else to work with. This emptiness is terrifying. Naruto tried performing a simple night vision technique or illumination jutsu, but both seemed to fail as well, leaving him even more nervous than before. Shit. He would have hollered if he had been able to make a sound within the void. The seals must be blocking me from projecting chakra outwardly. Naruto's assumption was correct. The seals limited access to one's chakra once they were caught. While it would continue to circulate inside one's body, they would be unable to eject it in order to perform any techniques in jutsu. It also disrupted the flow of chakra, making one incapable of focusing chakra into specific body parts. This made tools like the Byakugan, Sharingan, or any technique that was affiliated with the body useless and impossible to activate. Limited in choice, Naruto took a step onto the path of glowing seals and noticed the immediate change in the environment. He was able to see again. He could feel the motions of his muscles. All of his senses had returned to him, and he was finally able to make out the appearance of the dreary chamber. A bypass seal, Naruto whispered to himself before he continued to follow the path out of the chamber, and into a network of rooms and tunnels. I suppose I don't have much of a choice but to follow the path. There is no way I want to feel, whatever that was again. Determined to continue and with that final thought, Naruto followed the suspicious path of glowing seals out of the chamber into the labyrinth. It was hours before Naruto found himself standing before a large set of doors. The curious thing was that these set of doors looked no different from the ones he had passed before, with the exception of glowing seals. I see, Naruto mused in revelation as he continued to examine the ceiling matrix that seemed present on every inch of the walls and floors when he was moving through the maze. As daunting and horrifying the experience had left him, he understood the potential and capability of such a seal. It was dangerous, and he was all too familiar with what it did. During his journey to the doors before him, he had plenty of time to contemplate and theorize many things about the maze of seals and stone. He couldn't help but believe that the security measures that existed in this place was phenomenal and far above anything he had seen, or even heard of before, as he reflected on his studies. To think something so powerful would be used, I can only imagine what it was meant to protect. He clearly understood that whatever was meant to be protected was significant, and clearly only for the eyes of members within the clan. From what little he could make out in the sealing matrix on the paths, it had characters for bloodline detection. This meant only those of a bloodline that had gained permission could activate the bypassing seal matrix. As for the sealing inscriptions that manifested the void, he could understand nothing. There were characters he had yet to see, and they were ordered in a manner so complex he couldn't even read them. He also felt like there was something missing. It wasn't that the matrix itself was missing something, it was more like it was impossible for Naruto to see it. Until he figured out what that was, he could only be left in the dark. There is much more to the art of sealing than I thought. He had also pondered why a maze would be constructed, considering how powerful the seal that had blocked out his senses was. It simply didn't make sense at first, but he felt that he could understand the reasoning a bit. As foolproof as that seal seemed, I'm sure there must have been a way around it. From what I could gather, it was written quite detailed to cater to those senses. He began to theorize. Naruto understood that for any method and form of sealing to work, a thorough understanding was needed to perform the necessary actions. He considered very skilled in matrix comprehension and design, but he could only say that for some of the basic seals, considering Konoha was limited in resources that were related to the art. For a storage seal, you needed to have some understanding of space and containment. A blood seal was even simpler if you treated blood as the key, and the seal as the door. He had much to learn, that much he was aware, and hopefully he would by the end of his journey. This meant that if someone relied on a sense outside of the main five, there was a chance they could still move around without worry. He hypothesized. He wouldn't know for sure until he experimented with it, but first, he would need to be able to decipher it. Naruto turned his focus to the set of doors that glowed with seals he had yet to decipher. Naruto's eyes narrowed, and his muscles tensed. He was unsure of what awaited him beyond those doors. It could be a trap, an unbelievable treasure trove of artifacts and valuables, or it could be nothing at all. A room void of anything with whatever had previously existed inside is nothing more than ashes in a last-ditch effort to prevent outsiders from taking anything of worth. He focused his gaze onto two blood and chakra input seals, both being set on the opposite sides of the door. The seal he had recognized was clear to him, it was the Uzumaki clan symbol. When he turned his attention to the other one, it was a symbol he did not recognize. It appeared to be two squares overlapping the other with the one on top offset a bit to the bottom left corner. Strange. What does this stand for? Naruto pondered in confused frustration. Considering the symbol next to it represents my clan, does this mean there was a branch clan of the Uzumaki? Or did they house another clan much like Konoha does? Naruto's thoughts continued in this manner for a period of time, only ending up with more questions and headaches than he did answers. If there was another clan, how come they hadn't been mentioned before? What happened to them, and where are they now? He continued his thoughts in silent frustration. There's too much out in the open for now. Naruto, forcefully ending his series of questions and unsated curiosity, bit into his thumb, drawing blood. For now, let's just see what happens for the first one. With that lingering thought, he swiped his blood over the symbol of the Uzumaki and placed his hand over it, releasing chakra. Upon this action, the symbols and characters began to glow red, but other than that, nothing had happened. Naruto could only let out a small breath of disappointment as he looked to the other symbol. I guess both need to be activated simultaneously for anything to happen, but I'm not even sure if I would be able to. There was a great chance he could suffer from a powerful seal rejection. The repercussions that came with seal rejection varied on complexity of the seal. If Naruto had a scroll with a blood seal stolen from him and it was forcefully unsealed, at best it would generate a small explosion, thereby blessing the offender's hands and arms with second or third degree burns. With a seal this complex, the whole building might collapse, crushing his entire body and leaving his existence as nothing more than a memory. Buried with him would be whatever treasure lied beyond the door, never to be found by another ever again. Despite the inherent risk, Naruto had already made his decision. He was determined to find whatever this thing of value was, and was willing to give his life for it. He understood that there would be some who would be sad for his death. But he simply couldn't let this opportunity pass. He was an Uzumaki, and they were individuals stubborn down to their blood and bones. It was their inherent nature, and while he wouldn't be as pronounced in this behavior like most Uzumaki were, it did not mean he still didn't possess this trait. It was only subdued thanks to Danzo's training, allowing him more control of his actions. He had come so far already, and he was not willing to turn back. The truth behind his heritage was always a question of concern for him since he was given a book on the Uzumaki by Danzo. He knew Danzo was never one for charity and he had reasons for giving the book to him, reasons he was aware of the moment it was handed to him. The book was small and protected by a seal that would only allow the eyes of an Uzumaki to bear witness to. There was not much in the small book, but it did mention some legends and history of their clan. It mentioned their belief in the will of water, and what it entailed, as well as what they were famous for. Unfortunately for him, and much to Danzo's disappointment, there were no passages that went more in depth into seal construction and design. Perhaps they existed once within the torn pages, but there was no way to tell now. He had to thank Danzo for such a generous gift though. Before he had received the book, he had been in a dark place, with various circumstances fighting against him. He truly was close to becoming the emotionless husk Danzo had always desired, but it had changed the moment he received that book. The book became a hope and dream for him. He had always lived within the confines of Root, only seeing the light of day a few times, and that was during a mission. It was before the armistice of the Third Shinobi World War, so there was plenty of chaos and bloodshed to go around, something Itachi could attest to. It was the source of his trauma and desire for peace after all. The will of water was a belief in freedom and family, things he did not have and most desired. Rather than sit back and hope for the day to come, he would plow his way through with a will that would put most veteran shinobi to shame. It was a stubbornness capable of contending with the temper of Kushina Uzumaki. A fire had been lit in his eyes that day as he continued to read the legends and tales of his clan. He would fight for his freedom to his last breath, and that was a promise of a lifetime. I don't plan to leave this place empty-handed. Naruto took a deep breath before biting into his other thumb, drawing blood once more. I can only hope they were connected to my family in some way. Well, here goes everything. With that last thought, performed the same action he did the other seal. For a moment, there was nothing, until the seal began to glow blue. For a moment, he was ecstatic that he had succeeded, until he felt that he couldn't remove his hands from the seals. The problem began when Naruto began to feel a strong pull on his chakra network. The seal was quickly draining him of his chakra, which would normally not be an easy feat for an Uzumaki. Somehow though, the door seemed to drink his chakra faster than a human could swallow water. At this point, Naruto was cringing in pain, heaving for air as he felt the strain on his chakra network. He was losing too much, too fast, and he could feel every bit of it. This continued to worsen as the two seals then began to expand their light across the door, tracing each character and symbol. As the complexity of the sealing matrix grew and the light stretched across, so did the amount of pain Naruto felt. Damn it! Naruto screamed in his head. He was experiencing a pain he had yet to experience before. He was used to tolerating physical pain, but never had he felt something like this. His chakra network was getting attacked directly, devouring whatever chakra his tenketsu points had flowing, down to the last drop. This was worse than any technique a Hyuga would be capable of tenfold. Chakra was a combination of physical and spiritual energies, used in conjunction to create miracles that would otherwise be impossible for a normal human. So it wasn't just physical pain he was feeling, he felt like his soul itself was going to be devoured. This was almost the exact opposite of what he felt when his senses were blocked. Pain coursed through every inch of his body. He could hear a sharp ringing in his ears that managed to make them bleed. He had tears of blood streaming from his eyes as he witnessed the happenings on his body and the door with tunneled vision. His tongue was numbed from the pain, and he could smell the iron of the blood pouring from the orifices of his body. I'm not going to be killed by some door. Naruto had all but yelled out his determination to resist the pull on his energy. As if reading the Uzumaki's determination, the markings began to glow in a bright flash of white, blinding Naruto and lighting the darkness of the labyrinth. Once the light died down, Naruto began to feel the door creak open with the weight he had pressed against it. When it had opened fully, Naruto had stumbled in with short staggered steps. His knees were weak and everything else felt completely drained. Naruto knew he was on his last legs, but he had to see if this was worth the effort and pain he suffered. What he saw before him was an ancient-looking pedestal with 2 scrolls over it. They seemed to float above the pedestal, as if to demonstrate their value as some sort of divine item. The one to the left-hand side was a black scroll with his clan crest in white over it, while the other was a white scroll with the crest he had yet to discover in black. Naruto let out a short, strained chuckle. Between panting breaths, Naruto spoke to the scrolls as if they could understand him. Hey, I really hope you were worth it. With those last words spoken, Naruto collapsed forward, slipping into a silent state of unconsciousness.